welcome to Town Hall 101. Let's start our march to 200. All right, it's Wednesday. Let's put the slide there, Madison. All right, so welcome to our town hall. My name's John Best. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Best Innovation Group, and with me, my good friend and one of the nicest people in the business, Mr. Michael Lawson. Hi, Mike.
Right back at you, John. Right back at you, sir.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next slide here. Talk a little bit about our sponsorship. If you haven't been to something that CUNA has put on, you need to go. CUNA has all kinds of councils, all kinds of resources, people, programs, events, everything you could ever think that you might need. You can go find at CUNA. And if you're a Crayian person and you're looking to sort of get into the groove, CUNA is the place to do it. Speaking of getting in the groove, CU broadcast, not
I'm gonna close my door.
CU. What's that?
Close my door. Hang on.
Wait, your garage door, is it open? That's weird. I've never seen your garage.
I have to open the garage door to let her in.
Yeah, so she parks like right in front of you.
Right behind me, yes. There's a tennis ball hanging right here. No, she's the other.
Oh, check out. I got a new set. Look, it's the whole new
looks
thing.
Great. Looks great. Well done, sir.
Thank you. Let's see if my head fits perfectly between the two TVs. That was by design.
You have these big TV ears. It looks good.
Yeah. It looks like I have little flappy TV ears. Anyways, go to cbroadcast.com for the absolute best and latest information, stuff you need to know about the industry. And I'll let you do big and we'll get moving with our guest.
Best Innovation Group. What don't you do, John? That's the thing. I mean, that's the more opportune question, but you guys are always doing something there technology wise. And I think today's talk is going to kind of jibe with what you're going to be doing here in the future. Well, right now and in the near term future, right? So it's going to be really cool, all the ChatGPT stuff, all the AI stuff. So you guys are definitely all in on that for good reason. And I think the credit unions are going to benefit as a result. So yeah, so you guys need some technology, fintech needs out there. Best Innovation Group is your answer. Go check them out at big-fintech.com. Go check them out today. All right, sir, let's get on with it. I'm excited for this one.
Let's get to it. Today's guest, a longtime friend. He's currently the Chief Information Officer of Central Willamette Credit Union. He's been in the Crayian space for many, many years. He's always been forward thinking. He's done incredible things in his career. And he's one of those guys that sees the future really, really well. And recently, Joey and I have always kept in touch. But recently we have bonded over our love of large language models, ChatGPT, and what it could possibly do for the credit union. And so I invited him on today's show to talk about his experience, what he's been doing, because I really think that Joey has an incredible grasp of this. So Joey, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, John. Thanks for having me. Really, really happy to be here and always really happy to talk about this topic. I mean, it is, as you said, it's an exciting topic. Just so many possibilities, so many unknowns, and it's an exciting future. I mean, what a time to be involved in technology and to see these advancements. It's really mind blowing. It's really mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's been. I mean, when you look at what's going on and the stuff I've even been able to just see locally has been amazing. So yeah, let's talk about that, Joey. So Joey, start from the beginning. Start from Joey wakes up one day, like we all did, like, hey, it's a normal day, back to the credit union. I've got security policies and data governance and all this, and then you log in and take it from there.
Okay, sure. So I don't recall, John, the exact moment. I wish that I could, but I know that when the light bulb went on, and some way I made my way over to ChatGPT, OpenAI, and was able to log on and run my first prompt. I don't know. I wish I would have saved that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the eye-opening part came with realizing I could write code. So we're a big AWS shop. We have a lot of our infrastructure over at AWS, and that's been a journey over the last few years. And certainly that includes, really understanding that infrastructure is code. I mean, all the virtualization and stuff have led us all to there, but you get into an AWS ecosystem and, it really sinks in, like everything is code. Our entire systems run on code. Our servers are code-based. I mean, all of that. So realizing that it could not only write code, but that ChatGPT could do it at an acceptable level, really at an astonishing level based upon anything we had seen previously, right? And playing with that, the light bulb went on and things started clicking as to, wait a minute, what does this mean? I am sitting here interfacing with this thing where I'm doing everything from talking about like having it tell me stories and just trying to find what its barriers or boundaries were, to having it write JavaScript code for me that at least at first seemed legitimate, followed up on it, and in fact it was. That was when the light bulb came on. So realizing that it could write code and understand code, suddenly I realized that this is a thing that has the possibility of shaping how we do things. Because if my infrastructure is code and this thing is capable of understanding that code and furthermore writing that code, it is one small step away from controlling that code. And I suddenly found myself with opposed feelings of fear and excitement. And I will tell you, since that day in December, I have been waking up, and I know I'm not alone in this. I have been waking up every morning, long before the sun comes up, sitting down to understand more about what the opportunities and threats are in this AI revolution.
So what were your fears and what were your excitement?
Yeah, so pushing some of the boundaries of this, I think the fears were, and they remain, I think that these are legitimate fears. I think some of the concerns that people express, I think, are perfectly legitimate. Furthermore, some of these fears come directly from some of the lead scientists, OpenAI themselves. I mean, the OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, has not really pulled any punches on this topic. And neither has their chief scientist, Ilya. This technology we found ourselves in suddenly kind of proliferating everywhere, I firmly believe when they say it, hands down, has the ability to be a complete catastrophe. There is responsibility that we need to engage with it, with rolling this thing out. These things can get away from us. Now, ChatGPT's launch, I think wisely, even though I applaud them for the brave step that they took in rolling it out to the public like this, they didn't allow it to be hooked directly up to the internet, or they didn't allow it to turn around and run and call APIs on websites or whatever, which was, very good for, I think, for everybody. But certainly it can, not ChatGPT, but others implementations of it. I mean, it can now, and that means that it can actually run code, it can execute code, it can influence, it can manipulate infrastructure if it's allowed to, local systems. So with its abilities, I mean, it absolutely has the possibility of doing things that are completely unintended. And we do need to be responsible as this technology advances. And I'm glad that someone like OpenAI, at least at this point, on the surface, they appear to be taking a responsible approach to it and kind of democratizing this thing. But that won't always be the case, right? I mean, that's not everybody. And there are other solutions, and there are people developing solutions all the time. So, there are a lot of threats there. And I think that we need to learn and understand what those threats are. And part of that and to be able to do that, we've got to understand the nature of this thing. Okay. So that takes me back to the excitement of it. I think people who I think you can read about it, you can hear about it, you can have conversations about it, but until you really put your hands on this and start understanding it from a personal level, I don't think you can really grasp what this might mean. And so as I, in those first few moments, started exploring, like trying to find the boundaries of this thing, where does it end? Where does it hit its limits? That just takes you down a rabbit hole of possibilities. Well, wait a minute, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I think that most people who have used this technology, they have these stories too, right? Well, I used ChatGPT to do this, or I used this, or hey, the other day, like I was talking with ChatGPT and it said this or that. I mean, you can go online and see these posts all over the place with examples of people just having sometimes entertaining conversations, sometimes concerning conversations, sometimes productive conversations, what have you. But I mean, that's part of the fun and excitement of it, is just learning about something brand new that is so capable of interacting with us. And in fact, John, I think it was with one of your groups, we were having a conversation and we polled the room briefly, right? About, okay, give me your best ChatGPT story. And we kind of went around the room and several people chimed in, and we saw everything from, one individual that was using it to write music, right? We saw another individual that was using it with their children to tell bedtime stories. We saw another individual using it to like write policy and procedure. All of this, right? And more from one single tool. I mean, the breadth of capability of this tool is absolutely astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing. So there's so many rabbit holes to go down that since that time in December, I mean, it's hard to stay focused and kind of pick a lane for productivity and move forward with a single lane, because you're constantly like, oh, well, ChatGPT can do this. And what about this? What about that?
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's fascinating, the fear that you talked about, because I was just, thinking about what you said about interacting with humans. And if it could surf the web, I mean, it can go write posts, it can answer emails, it could go buy something from a website with your credit card. It could do so many things, and it can understand what it's reading and figure out how to get to the next thing. It could fill out an entire loan app, which is actually one of the tests I've been playing around with. Is here's a loan app, fill this in, just to see what it would do. And yeah, it's mind-boggling. It hurts your head to think about it in every aspect. I don't think, like you said, that this is something you and I bonded over, just like we bonded over the internet many, many years ago when it first came out, and we were talking about that. So yeah, it's amazing.
It is amazing, and I think I think that it requires a cultural shift for us to really be able to take advantage of this and leverage its potential, but also really reconcile some of the threats that it poses. And this cultural shift, I think, is, we're used to turning to computers to deliver concise information, consistent information, predictable information. And we suddenly find ourselves with these new technology capabilities that don't behave that way. Right? The information isn't precise. It changes, sometimes dramatically, right?
Yep.
And yet we're dealing with a computer. We're constantly reminding ourselves when we work with this AI that we're dealing with a computer. We're dealing with a computer. And it is not easy for us to kind of clear this hurdle of a computer that is almost thinking and rationalizing and interacting with us in a way that a human would. And it's very
that isn't consistent as well. I get your point. It's like, we're used to a computer. If you can tell it's a computer, because if you ask the question and then you ask it again, it sort of responds in the exact same sort of formatted way. And this does not do that.
Yeah, it does not. I was recently at, I saw a presentation that I went to on ChatGPT, and they were describing to the audience that ChatGPT had been trained on all of the information on the internet and sat on top of a huge database that it was getting its information from. And besides just being inaccurate, what I found unfortunate about that understanding of how it worked was it missed some of the brilliance of what is occurring here. So if we think about, first of all, it wasn't trained on all of the information from the internet, right? The internet is like 64 zettabytes, whatever that is. Yeah. I looked it up. It's like 64 zettabytes. I don't even know what that is, but it was like 570 gigs of data, right? That this thing was trained on.
Yes.
And it doesn't sit on top of a database, and that does it injustice, because a database, as we know, is a set of facts, right? It's a set of information and attributes. And every time we query that database, we run the same query, we get back the same answer. And that is what we're used to. We're used to the facts. Computers hold the facts. And anytime that they stray from those facts, something has gone wrong, right? If something doesn't output the way as expected, we know we have a problem. And we go address and we fix that problem, because we are used to this consistency in these set of facts. That is simply not how this thing operates. It doesn't operate on the facts. And I think that this is important because the brilliance of this thing is derived from what's in between the facts. The brilliance of it is derived from the correlation between the facts, how one thing relates to another thing, not the things themselves, but how they relate to each other. And that is completely new for us. And it's more in line with the way that we think as people, right? So, John, if you go and read a book, you might come and tell me about that book that you read, and you might recite some of the information that you learned from that book, some of the facts within that book, right? You can repeat those back to me, right? But that's not where the conversation gets interesting for you and I, is it? The conversation gets interesting when you take that information that you've learned and then you correlate it with other events in your life, with other experiences. And we start talking about what those facts mean to us and how they might affect our future vision of things, or how they might change our behavior, or what we might do differently based on it, because it's this correlation effect that we engage with as human beings, right? That is what this is doing, right? It doesn't sit on a database of facts. Its brilliance comes from something that's in between the facts. And if you simply approach this as if it is a database retrieving information, you're missing
Seeing the mark, yeah,
the
entirely.
opportunity is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that leads me to trying to wrestle with what's the right way to view this thing? How do we look at this? I mean, do we put on a tinfoil hat and say, wow, this thing, let's treat it like a person? Or do we hold on to this notion that artificial intelligence is this bare bones machine Terminator style thing that's scary? Or do we find something in between? I don't know. But what I do believe is that if we don't start at least viewing this as being an assistant of sorts, then we're going to continuously be trying to shove a round peg through a square hole, and we're going to miss the opportunities, and we're going to misunderstand some of the threats that it poses as well if we don't understand that. Ilya no, I'm going to butcher his last name, so I'm not going to try to repeat it. But Ilya is the chief scientist and co-founder at OpenAI. Something he said just last month to Forbes I thought was really, really interesting. He said that he is starting to see the need for, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's starting to see the need for the combination of skill set that includes both technology and psychology. And this is the chief scientist, right? That this combination of skill set is emerging as a need in working with this technology. And I mean, if that's not a paradigm shift, I don't know what is, John.
Yeah, I mean, who would ever say that in our space? Who would ever say, yeah, we need to have some psychology for the correlation of this? But your point about the book was a really good analog for understanding how these transformers work in the underlying technology, because where things become interesting is I know you, and as a result of me knowing you, I could say something about a particular book that I think I may have read that book, but when I give you the context of the book, I'm looking for things that Joey, I think, would find entertaining or find interesting. And so that when we have that discussion, that's the subcontext of what we're doing. And you're right. This all came from a paper that was written, some time ago that turned into this transformer model. And it's interesting because I was just on the phone with NVIDIA talking with them, and in their mind, there's only 8 teams in the world that can actually build these large language models. Now I'm sure that's growing, but so it's a specialized thing, and you're right. I think it's not good to just view it as this database, because it's more about how that database relates. And so, for example, one of the demos I saw you do was, and I've done some similar ones, was like a contract or something but anybody could put a contract in a database. What they can't do is answer questions about that contract with regard to that person's position in the credit union, or that person's job, or that person's, what their responsibilities are as it relates to that contract. And that's where I think the psychology comes in, right? Because now they're trying to understand, like, for example, Oh God, I don't want to get into it. The semantics and it's just so many things. I started to boggle myself again. I don't want to do that. But yeah, I totally get that. That is absolutely the perspective that, and it's wild. I put a link for for Elia's Wikipedia if you're interested. He's a Canadian chief scientist, but just blown away by what that is. So let me ask you this. So as you know, you're chief information officer of Central Willamette. Why don't you give everybody a little background on Central Willamette just for a quick sec, if you don't mind?
Certainly. And it's Central Willamette.
Willamette. I always say it wrong. I'm sorry. I did that yesterday too.
Yeah.
Well, she had corrected me more, so my bad.
Absolutely. Yeah. So served similar positions at First Tech Credit Union and Columbia Credit Union, and now at Central Willamette. And comparatively, we're small. We're $500 million credit union, and yet I think that does afford us, John, some maybe some luxuries that quite possibly larger institutions don't have. Though I mean, this is cultural; it doesn't necessarily mean that. But we have a leadership team in place that I think has allowed us to kind of move aggressively in this area, and it's aggressively, like it's not been that long, right? We're talking a matter of months.
It's like January.
Yeah, exactly. But we've been moving as fast as we can, and we have an environment that kind of supports that kind of exploration. So we're a small credit union, yet I think we've done some things that are pretty cool, particularly in this space. So we have done a board presentation around ChatGPT and started those conversations with our board. We've just a couple of weeks ago, we did an all staff meeting on ChatGPT and introduced it to them and talked about some of the things that are possible with ChatGPT, some of the risks that exist with AI, at least getting our staff down the path of being primed for this cultural shift that needs to take place to really use this. So that was exciting. And that session was great. We had a lot of lively discussion. We did it over Zoom, a lot of conversation in the chat window, and a lot of follow-up conversation and talk internally too. So that was really cool to be able to do that with our staff. And I'm really proud of that. We've been doing some internal development. We've been working on things in just to understand it and using the APIs internally, so that we can better imagine how we can use it in the future. So that stuff's really cool. So for Central Willamette, sitting down here in Albany, Oregon, I think it's really exciting that we're able to do that, and we're in this environment to be able to come and have a conversation, with you and everyone else here about ChatGPT.
Joey, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
I was going to ask Joey if you are talking to other credit unions, and if so, what are you hearing out there from other credit unions kind of going down this path that you're going down? What are you hearing out there?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Michael. I'm talking to as many people as I possibly can, because I am just so intrigued by this evolution and this development. So yes, I've been talking to a lot of credit unions, and I think it's fair to say, and completely understandable, there is just a mix of viewpoints on this, right? And there are people at different places in the spectrum. And I mean, like I said, it requires that you get hands-on to really start to understand, some of the capabilities and what this might mean to us. And understandably, it's not been very long. There are people that are still, maybe just reading about it in the news, or maybe talking to their peers about it, and haven't kind of taken that step yet to go hands-on with it. And that's okay. But it does present a real spectrum of experiences and people and viewpoints on this thing. Not to mention, it can be somewhat polarizing. I mean, we can easily get into questions of politics. We can get into questions of existential questions. We can get into questions about what our own existence means to us. I mean, and these are technology conversations, right? Like, it's crazy. It's so fascinating. And so it does become more and more difficult to kind of walk into a room and try to have a conversation with a group of people, knowing that, people do fall in different places on this spectrum, and without walking in and stepping on a landmine somewhere at the same time. But hey, look, this is part of the process.
Right.
And this process is not going to happen until we start making it happen within our own peer groups, within our own organization, and start taking on these challenges. So yeah, it's been an interesting experience, Michael.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I had when you said that you've been talking to your staff was the idea that there's a fear out there amongst employees that they'll be replaced by these tools. Was there any of that? Did anyone, or did the transparency of you coming forth and going, hey, let's take that off the table. Let's talk about how we're going to use these tools. Do you think that was a good, did that perspective come into your mind at all? And did you get any feedback on that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Almost universally, I found a lack of fear of being replaced by the tool. Right or wrong, I don't know, but that has been the experience within my organization. And yeah, I could speculate why people come to that conclusion, but fortunately, that's not been a hurdle that we've really had to address because people have fallen on that side of things. And I think that that's great and appropriate. And after all, we are credit unions, and we know that, I mean, kind of industry wide, there is, we view our people as valuable. Credit unions don't tend to overall be overly aggressive with staff, or, doing what some companies do, cut off the bottom 15% every year or whatever the case may be. I mean, we value our people and we try to hold on to our people. And so maybe that's part of the reason why the message has landed the way that it has. But no, it's largely been viewed as a productivity tool. That doesn't mean that there isn't some resistance though, John. I mean, I think that there is some resistance with embracing the technology, thinking that it's maybe a trivial tool, or, I can do my job better than it can, or it's just going to tell me a funny story and not really help me with drafting a report or something. So I think it's more of that, just hesitancy to really jump in and use it as opposed to being replaced by it. And I think that that's right. I mean, and that's the way we're pursuing it too,
Yeah. And from that perspective, did you encourage them to use it and to share their stories? Did you provide a methodology that said these are the guidelines that you could use it, and these are, we want you to be share how that went?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did encourage our staff to use it. We were delivered a very strong message about how not to use it. So specifically member information and sensitive information. We divided up the kind of playing field between our internal tool that we've been creating, as opposed to the public ChatGPT interface. And we kind of made some distinctions between those things. We encouraged our people to create personal accounts on ChatGPT to begin to get used to it and understand what it does and some of its capabilities. At the same time, instructed that personal account is not for business use. It's not to be used to enter any of Central Willamette's information, et cetera, et cetera. And to regard it as you would any other vendor or service that you use outside of Central Willamette. You don't go
like a Google search, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
or Facebook or any social media, right? Don't go dropping our procedures or policies out on Facebook. So
right.
So yeah, we included some instruction there. And but then started talking to them about our forthcoming internal tool as well, and kind of the differences there. And that is because with the agreement with OpenAI and use of the APIs, it affords you some additional data protections, security controls, retention of different policies for data retention and data use through the APIs. So not to mention the ability to review OpenAI's policies, SOC 2, and other security documents. We have a little more comfort there on how we use it. We're not going to go be dropping any member data in it anytime soon or anything like that, any PII, any sensitive information. But it does give us a little bit more latitude, and we educated staff on the difference there.
So, this reminds me, and Joe, you told a great story. I'd like you to tell it again. We had a similar kind of thing around the internet when it started, but I think you had, what was it, Walt Disney's server under your desk, when you started working. We'll get to that in a minute, but I do think there's something to be learned here. And Mike, this is a lot like, if you think your employees aren't using it, there probably are some that are. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't get out in front of it and get it, and I don't know it's the right thing just to lock it down. I've seen some folks taking that approach of, hey, we're just going to make sure they can't get to it. Well, they have their phones. They're not going to, unless you're collecting phones on the way in, they could still ask it questions and do things and act on that information. But when search engines first came out and the web was first put on, I was there. I worked at Suncoast when we went from PC to PC, going, there you go, you got the web now, and you get the web and you get the web, and then came the not safe for work guidelines and the things that were always kind of post. It appears to me that you're taking and learning a lesson from all those years, and so maybe talk about that a little bit, being proactive in that space.
Yeah, certainly. So I'll try to tie these things together. The quick story is that early part of the 90s, internet boom kind of taking place, and I found myself very similarly completely enthralled with the internet and had no idea where it would take us, of course, but just that it seemed really important. And I just naturally gravitated and immersed myself in the internet. And so found myself in New York City and working for a internet startup, because they were all internet startups at that point. And it was the early days. I mean, it was the Wild West, and we were literally running a Walt Disney web server underneath my desk, like literally underneath my desk. And one day I knocked that thing over. I kicked the Disney server and took Disney offline because I accidentally knocked the thing over, And
that's all, but everything starts somewhere, and
yeah. But to your point, John, we were putting things on the internet as fast as we could, right? We were standing up websites all over. We were giving our data to people, and because we couldn't see what might happen. We didn't know. I mean, we were in this, connected world, but not in that way, right? Not in that way. And since that time, we kind of culturally, collectively, societally have learned a lot more, right? We now face another revolutionary moment in this regard, and we're a little bit wiser than we were in the early 90s. We now understand some of the things that can go wrong. We understand some of the ways that our information can be used and how we might need to protect it or avoid certain pitfalls, at least some of them, right? We understand some of them. And so I think that is one reason, because we've seen this play out in many different arenas since the 90s and since the advent of the internet. And so it gives us rightfully, a more cautious approach to how this new revolution might affect us. And I do think that takes, I think we all live on kind of a spectrum, right, of fear and opportunity, and we all kind of fall in different places along that, and none of it's wrong, right? I mean, it's all justified. But we make our choice, especially early on in a situation we are right now, we make our choice of where we fall on those, and based on our experiences. And it's a good thing that we have those experiences behind us. I mean, it's safe to say we wouldn't have arrived with AI where we are today had it not been for the internet. I mean, those things had to, follow one another, but it does help us make, I think, at least a little more informed decisions and where we go from here.
Yeah, I agree. So this is the part where I like to open it up and get some perspective. I see some folks on that I want to, and some folks too, Joey. So I see Chris is here, Seneda. Chris, just if you're willing to open up. Oh, he did. So he unmuted. So that means he'll talk to us. So Chris, one, do you have any questions for Joey? And then my question to you is, has Virginia talked to anybody? Have you guys sat down and talked to your staff or sent out anything? And because I'm thinking now that Joey's kind of brought this to light, that's probably, it's something needs to happen. But go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's certainly internally we're talking quite a bit about it. What are the possibilities? We're still trying to understand this, and I think we're probably not as adventurous as Joey has been. So I do have a question for Joey, and just in terms of what were some of those first steps? What made you say to yourself, wow, we need to get in front of all of our staff about this one?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and it's good to hear from you. It always is. You really enjoy all my conversations that I've had over the past few years with Chris. Well, one thing is I personally went to work. I mean, I put my hands on the keyboard and I picked up some code. I used to program and I dusted off and I started doing it again because I felt like the best way for me personally to get my head wrapped around this thing was to start doing it. Directionally correct, it didn't matter. Just start interfacing with this and understand it underneath the covers so that I felt like I could even have a conversation with my staff about it. I didn't feel like I could have an intelligent conversation without going through that first. So for me, it was kind of really getting my hands dirty so that I could then talk to others on our staff about it. And then number two, Chris, was, I guess at some point, a realization of some of the dramatic capabilities and power of this thing, and feeling like that the best way to understand the risks was to understand more about the nature of it and how it behaves. It's kind of a know your enemy, I guess, mentality to some degree. I needed to understand how it, quote, thought in order to better understand what some of those risks might be, and then how to lead anyone else through the scenario of avoiding those risks and avoiding some of those pitfalls. So that's what kind of took me into the staff conversation, as well as that cultural change I've mentioned. I know that is going to take time. It's not that you just simply go from thinking that a computer is, bare bones metal and machine to thinking that you have now an assistant that is capable of what appears to be rational thought and can help you day to day. So I knew that was going to take time. So I wanted to get that process started with our staff, Chris, and to learn from them. I don't know how this is going to, all play out with staff. I can't possibly know that. But to me, there's no other way to find out than to start down that path.
One of the things that just struck me too was your board conversation. I'd be also interested in just, if you don't mind, a little bit of a feedback of how that went. Often we find our boards are a little bit, a lot of Creighton's find their boards struggle a little bit with new things. And so how did that go?
Yeah, that was a fun one. So as I'm sure that many of you know, demonstrations are great with ChatGPT when you're introducing it, right? I mean,
yeah, they're super fun.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So it's fun seeing light bulbs and eyes get big, and just, it's a lot of fun to do. Certainly I went into the board meeting. Admittedly, I was trying to be, kind of a strategic approach to it. One of my sample demo prompts included, what should a credit union board be concerned about with this technology? And, of course, it gave me, a list of 10 things that the board, oh yeah, we should think about that. Yeah. Oh, right. So that brought on some conversation. That was great. But I think that we also had probably one board member that I think was ready to go build a bunker immediately after and start, fortifying their position in what would be the AI takeover for the world. Now, yeah, that one was interesting.
You wanna try to get in good with them, so when they show up, they know you weren't against them. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, but that's been some time now, and we've had several board meetings since then, and they've been great. I mean, there's been a lot of interest in how it's developing and what we're doing, and I'm glad that we took that step and kind of got them over that initial hurdle, because now we're having productive conversations about it.
Well, and what I find is that once someone sort of imbibes the tool, I guess that's my best way of putting it, suddenly you notice this expediency that they have. They seem to be turning things around a little quicker. They seem to be like, once you learn how to use it, just like you had to learn how to use search, it made your life different. So I want to ask, we have Chris Odie on. I don't know if you know Chris from CU 2.0. I think he just got out of prison. I'm not 100% sure. I know that's where I met him. Not that I was in prison. I just was doing this work release program with some inmates and ran across him. But Chris, you work with a lot of vendors. So my curiosity is, Joey, by the way, I've seen what Joey wrote and it's brilliant. It was really cool. And Joey, I love you and you know this, but we also both know that you couldn't have coded that in December. Am I wrong? I mean, you couldn't have. You're a good coder. I've worked with you for years, right? We've done stuff side by side over the years, and OFS and everything else. What you showed me that I'm pretty sure you built was you and what they're, and I find this interesting, this idea of a co-pilot, this peer person. It's actually very interesting from my perspective because I work much better in that peer type thing. I'm really good at that. Like I like just sometimes our group will get on a big Zoom and just work when we're coding or doing something or solving a problem. But now you sort of have this entity that you can use in that regard. So that was pretty interesting. So you had to make something, but I wanted to see if Chris has come across anything in his fintech journeys that sort of has any relation to this so far. It appears he's in some sort of lounge.
I am. I'm just lounging around. This is work for me today. But I'm carrying myself.
Is that the visitors area where it's in the federal? Go ahead.
Yes,
Chris,
sir. It is.
Pretty swanky.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So, hey, Joey, how you doing? Good to see you again.
As well.
Yeah, we've been obviously because I work with Kirk Drake and because he's a clone of John Best, and we'll get into any technology into the weeds.
Younger, better looking.
We've been working with it for quite a while, and I noticed that there's actually a dude on the line here, Sarup Parwani, from a company called Stenso, and we've been working with Sarup directly to develop something we're calling CU Copilot, and I believe he's actually testing it at Bell. There you are, Sarup. So yeah, we've been using it. Before I turn loose on Sarup, back to the board member thing. I appreciate you not calling me out when you were making fun of board members for not adopting new technologies. Thank you for that.
I thought about it, but I decided the inmate thing was more fun. So.
Yeah, but at South Bay, I'm going to try to use it for board the bylaws, right? I've been on the board for 13, 14 years. Don't tell anybody, but I've never actually read the bylaws. Like,
aren't you the chair?
I am the chair, right? I'm not going to sit down and read 50 pages worth of goofy English I don't even understand. If we could put it in ChatGPT and I could simply ask, how do you calculate net economic value, right? Which is a key indicator of credit union performance. I have no idea how it gets calculated. I just know what range it's supposed to be in.
What if we did this? We could feed it into NVIDIA's Picasso and it could turn it into a cartoon for you.
That would be much better.
Watch. Maybe you could even pick your characters like Fred Flintstone or somebody that you relate to.
And I love you. You know your audience, John. But Sarup's here. Sarup, if you want to tell them what you're doing with CU Copilot, it's the most fascinating GPT solution we've found at CU 2.0 so far.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. And Joey, awesome to see you as always. John, very nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you and really great to sync up. And thanks for allowing me to speak today. So we're, as I said, we actually, I don't come from a credit union background, so I'm sort of coming from the outside in. But about 2 years ago, we met Chris and Kirk and really started collaborating with credit unions and really fell in love with the space, the collaborative nature of credit unions, the fact that credit unions are all about the community and sharing knowledge in the community really resonated with me. So what we decided to do is launch a product called CU Copilot. And the product is really about consolidating knowledge within a given credit union and eventually the broader credit union space to really create efficiencies. What we find just working with financial institutions for many years is there's a lot of information that just doesn't flow throughout the organization. The information is there, it's just scattered. So what CU Copilot is all about is consolidating that information and making it available to the right individuals at the right time. And it really, GPT and other language models are at the core of that. Of course, a lot of questions come out of this in terms of privacy, in terms of how data is being leveraged. And those are questions that we all are answering together and learning together in terms of how to overcome these things. So that's really kind of what we do, and really happy to be here and collaborate with the rest of the community.
And I think it's interesting that co-pilot word is so interesting. So Joey, you've seen what Microsoft's doing. They're in your neck of the woods. I know you've worked directly with them for many years.
Mhm.
We actually have a conversation coming up with them, and to your point, Sarup, that's probably the hardest thing is that, you know, for example, you know, we were Joey, I took a page out of Joey's platform and was just wiring in data governance. Like, what's the idea of here's a bunch of data. Let me just feed you this document and you tell me what I need to do for my data governance policy. Do you know how much work that saves out of a data dictionary of how much of this needs to be covered, what it needs? I need to document it. I need to be ready because the regulations are kind of, you know, closing in on that. And it did it in about a minute. I had a little thinking to do. I had to watch it think, which was kind of fun. If you haven't done an agent executor or watch a chain think, it's kind of cool to watch. But to your point, I mean, that's something that is a barrier for vendors, right? So, hey, I want to get my thing up. Okay, let's see your data dictionary. Great. We got to go through our security stuff. What's that going to be? We should be done by 2024, maybe. And what that does is it prevents the credit union from moving forward with newer products and newer things to provide services to the members and it's not an unnecessary thing. It just slows things down. It has to happen. Joey has to read that 50-page document, you know, because he has to. It's his job. It's what he does. But if he had something that could sort through that for him, they trust that knew how Joey thinks, which is kind of interesting. So I had this idea, Sarup, and I'll throw it at you too, Joey. I was thinking that pretty much everybody in the credit, you could almost come up with like the credit union buddy. Like everybody needs their own agent. But what's interesting is, could it be trained on you, Joey? Could it be trained on what Joey's sort of like fine-tuned against what Joey's needs are and what Joey does for the organization or a particular position via the job description or something, and then say, okay, now analyze this based on what you know I'm supposed to do, you know, and help me discern and prioritize or whatever. I mean, God, it just starts to get your head spinning. It makes me want to go outside and chop wood or do something that's like pretty easy that I don't have to think a lot about, because it's a lot. So Sarup, do you have any credit unions using your platform?
Yep, we've onboarded a few right now. It's a new product. We just rolled it out, but it's really easy to get started with the basic sort of policy and procedures documents, and just to surface up answers to common questions that members may have that aren't getting answered today by high turnover frontline staff. So that's like low hanging fruit for us. And kind of like to your point, John, like making it easy to onboard credit unions through like a low level of effort, you know, low stakes use case is kind of where we're starting. And we'll build from there. So super excited to expand with the community as we go on.
So I want to put my plug in for Sarup too. We've had a few conversations at this point, and I'll attest that him and his team seem to have their head really in the game. They really spend their time developing and exploring these new capabilities and new possibilities. And I've been really impressed with what Sarup and his people have been doing and the path that they're going along and their ambition to follow it. Definitely, I feel a bit of a kindred spirit with Sarup in that regard. They've been good conversations.
Well, you know, it's fascinating that you bring that up, because I don't know that it understands on the call that literally every day something could change on you. Like, for example, Joey and I were meeting out at our innovation club, which he came and spoke at out in Phoenix. And the day before, they dropped the Chat 3.5 Turbo on us. And we both had been doing a lot of work to kind of share what we had discovered and done some prototyping and had to start over. We kind of didn't even talk to each other, ran each other in the morning. You could tell neither of us had sleep because we had been retooling the demos and the information to wire that in. So when you say that you have to have a passion and ambition for this, you really do, because things are changing. Just the nature of the platform is making things go faster, particularly for the people who are developing in it, because you can use it to increase your speed and increase your velocity overall. as well as your validity, which is fascinating to me. So,
yeah, it is. It it is. I think it becoming increasingly difficult to keep up with what's going on. It's not getting any easier. And I mean, we're not alone in this. You go online and you look at any developer community, developer forums, and repeatedly you'll find, developers themselves just expressing I guess, both the burden and excitement of how fast this stuff is moving. And I know that we saw, it's a call to action or something from some of the prominent people in technology of slowing things down. And I'm not going to even speculate on some of the motivations there, but the fact that we're even talking about slowing technology down is so weird, right? I mean, it's just bizarre for us to be in this place. And that's just one thing among so many other things that are bizarre about this. And I think it takes a real mindset. And I think Sarup and his team have it to deliver something that is really valuable for the credit union industry. I really look forward to what they deliver there.
So Joey, let's close this out. We're getting close to the end here. And the thing that you and I wanted to talk about on this was we've been talking about the possibility of how this might expedite what I think is the credit union superpower and literally the industry's, I don't want to say only hope because it sounds kind of nihilistic in a way, but what I think their greatest strength is, which is collaboration. You and I have been talking about ways that, I shared with you prompt layer and some of the other things that are going on. Talk a little bit about that, and I don't mind riffing with you, but I think we both see incredible opportunity there's a big opportunity for collaboration.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm not a predictor of the future. I have ideas on what some of it might look like based on experiences in the past. And experiences in the past, I think we, as a credit union industry, we all share this desire to collaborate. It's one of our greatest strengths. It's one of our greatest superpowers. And we do a lot of that, right? But there are also situations when it comes down to it, and we've seen these in other models, right? You get on the same core system, or you get, on the same this system or that system, and now you can collaborate, right, with other credit unions and do it at a greater scale and all this efficiency, except for when it comes down to, well, yeah, but we open loans this way, or our product looks like this and it's slightly different, or we have this policy and requirement and it's different between credit union A and credit union B. And suddenly you find yourself in a situation where this starts to break down, right? That collaboration starts to break down, and we're not able to really fully leverage it. I think that the nature of this technology actually solves some of those challenges. I don't know what it looks like yet, John, but when I think about what it can do by summarizing information, by aggregating information and analyzing it across a disparate set of data, documents, whatever the case, I think we start to have new opportunities for collaboration across these groups that might have otherwise faltered to a degree because of all of the baked in processes and procedures and whatever that we have. These prompts, I'm just going to simplify it, these prompts, and when I say prompt, I mean the question that you ask or the information that you provide to one of these models like ChatGPT, these prompts are assets, okay? There is a new skill set.
They're IP, really.
They are absolutely IP. They are absolutely IP. And that's not just Joey's take on it. I mean, you take, John, you look at LangChain, like this is a development framework built on these concepts.
Yep.
These prompts are assets for our organization because they will deliver different levels of value based on how the question or the information is constructed in the first place. And the ability to share these prompts, to leverage these prompts ongoing, to reuse these prompts, this provides, I think, a great opportunity for our kind of collaborative environment across credit unions. And it just may be something that normalizes some of the differences in data, processes, information that have kind of hindered us to some degree in the past. I really do believe that. I think it's a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, I mean, even just discovering, like, for example, recently I was talking to the incredible Kevin Wright from Edition. He's just such a bright guy. He was sharing with them a practice that they're creating and had about not expiring cards in December, which makes a lot of sense, you know, because no one wants to get a new card, you know, in November, December. But, you know, you had to be on that call, you had to figure it out, you had to talk to it. But if you had something that could sort of analyze another credit union and go, hey, here's some things they're doing differently than you are. Doesn't mean you have to do them, but some of these might be good ideas. And then you would start to see, I think, like you said, this cohesive sort of structure. So Joey, I know you're super interested in this. And I know, you know, I talk to you all the time about it, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and talk about what you guys are doing. And Sarup, thank you for joining us as well. And Albert was mentioning earlier that there are jobs coming up. There's so much stuff that's popped up in the last like 3 months around this. It's amazing how quickly it is and what it's doing. So with that in mind, one, if someone wants to contact you about this, they can hit you on LinkedIn, right? That's a good spot to grab you and say, hey, I loved what you said. I'm interested. Tell me more about your board. I know you like to share and collaborate, and I appreciate that. Any parting thoughts for the group, you know, with regard to this, that, you know, here's the one thing I would do, or here's the one thing, or what's your final piece of wisdom there?
Yeah, my two things, and I'm going to avoid going, we don't have time, so not going to go too far into a doomsday scenario, but I do want to leave people with some considerations on some possibilities on the threats, right? I think that we need to think about AI type attacks, and not in the nature of, well, AI went and found a hole in our firewall. These things are social in nature. And I think that we need to think about what that means when a single person can launch what are essentially multiple, quote, people to come at us across different channels and convince us that they are real people. I think we need to get our heads there and understand what that means. Okay, so that's one. And then number two, I've already spoken about, John. It's this understanding this, making these changes take time. It is not just a technology. This is a cultural change that we will all experience. The question is how quickly are we going to move through that change and become a part of it? So one way or another, it's going to happen. I hope that we get started early as an industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was talking to Peter Diamandis, and Peter told me there'll be two types of organizations in the future: those that embrace AI and those that are merged and gone. And I you know, it's the old, there's the quick and the dead, right? And so I think that's a really good message right now, because you and I have both lived through these sorts of really high impact changes, the internet being one. And I've never seen anything like what we're seeing right now in my entire life. And every day I get up and go, what could I do with this next? And it's been a long time since I felt that way. I could see it in Sarup's eyes too. So it's very, very cool. Well, thank you all for joining us. And Joey, thank you for sharing, and just, you know, we'll keep banging away on this. And thanks everyone for taking the time to come and join us today.
Thanks for having me, John. Really enjoyed it.
Bravo.
Yeah, thank you.
Bravo.
Take care,
Well
everyone.
done.